Say hello to your friends. Why do you look like a crackhead? No, I haven't seen your LSD or the dragons in the kitchen. Why, hello there, endurance nerds. It is that time of the year yet again. Despite all of my pleading to slow the passage of time, I've been summarily overruled by the powers that be for another year running. Get this shit, you know what they told me? They told me that the Earth wasn't flat, and that, rotation, cosmic balance, some series of excuses that they could not even consider my strongly worded letter about them speeding up the passage of time every year that I get older. I don't think it's a me problem. I think it's a them problem. Somebody's messing with me. I need to be absolutely clear that I do not believe that the Earth is flat, and please, YouTube, do not mark this video as misinformation. Anyway, we are here to talk about Zwift Academy. This is a campaign that I cover every single year, and not to bury the lead on this video, guys, I actually don't think this year's offering is going to be of great value or interest to a lot of you watching this video. But stick around, we'll talk through the nuts and bolts, and I'll give you my opinion, and you can tell me in the comments below if you think you're going to participate this year. So let's get into it. I do want to spend a minute or two talking about what the Academy is at a very high level for those of you who are new to Zwift or new to the Academy this year. I'm going to leave some timestamps down below, so for those of you who need to get into the meat and potatoes and don't need this part, go ahead and use those links down below to fast forward to the next section. So Zwift Academy at a very high level is a flagship campaign for Zwift that they perform usually at the end of the summer and into fall here in the Northern Hemisphere. And what I mean by campaign is any series of events across a time horizon for which deliverables are required to get credit. So it's not unlike something like Tour de Zwift or any of the challenges that you might see that as you kind of check those boxes, you move towards completion. In this particular case, Zwift Academy is unique in that it is putting structured training or structured workouts at the forefront of the campaign. Other events are usually focusing on distance, time, elevation, or maybe a completion of a series of group events. Now, in this case, riders will move along completing their workouts and races that are going to be required for graduation from the Academy. And usually there are some unlocks or in-game swag along the way to keep people motivated and maybe even to show folks that they are engaging in something that's typically more difficult. Now, there are two paths when you go to graduate from the Academy. The first path is for the vast majority of riders out there, the typical amateur rider, community member that is going through to complete the Academy, mostly for a challenge for themselves. Maybe they want to introduce themselves to structured work. Maybe they just want to do some of their workouts with a larger group. There are a number of different motivating factors for your everyday community member. But what makes the Zwift Academy special is that second path. There's actually a path for individuals who want to seek a pro contract. Basically, it gives an opportunity for those people with elite level performance here on Zwift that may not otherwise have the resources or the availability, the geography to be noticed, to be found, to be out there racing so that they get that notoriety and that they are recognized by somebody who might be able to support their pro journey. With Zwift Academy, people have access to those eyeballs at a very high level right from the comfort of their own home. This campaign has a title sponsor in Canyon, so it is backed by two pro teams for the women's and the men's side, Canyon SRAM for the women, and everythingisphotogenic for the men. After people have graduated from the Academy, the entirety of that data set is collected and the cream rises to the top, so to speak, and those highest performers in terms of power profile and other performance metrics are aggregated and a series of semifinalists are selected. Those semifinalists will race against one another. They'll go through a series of finals until you have one winner on each side. The women's winner will win a one-year contract with Canyon SRAM, and the men's winner will go to the development team for everythingisphotogenic. You might be asking why there's a difference in the prizes between the women and the men. The simple answer is just demographics. Unlike other endurance sports, it seems like cycling is still very skewed and dominant in terms of numbers when it comes to men. Even at the pointy razor's edge of bell curve for performance at that very elite level, there is a depth of talent there that doesn't necessarily exist on the women's side. So that requires for the men an additional step, maybe some additional seasoning to make them ready for the pro ranks. It just is what it is. We hope to see that to improve over the next several years, but that's why there's a difference in prizes. But let's talk about the nuts and bolts of the program. I will be highlighting some of the changes that I've seen over years past, and it will help you to make an informed decision as to whether or not the Academy is going to be right for you. So let's start with that time horizon. This year, I think they made a positive change, making the Academy much more accessible and much more appealing to the community at large. Typically, they've started the Academy on different dates, somewhere between the end of August and even the end of September, and the Academy has usually lasted around 6 to 8 weeks. And this has been a point of consternation for a lot of folks, whether it was still in their indoor riding season or was overlapping with things like kids getting kicked off at school, and it was just very difficult for some people in the general community with other priorities in life to really make the Academy a priority. This year, the Academy runs from Monday, August 5th until Sunday, November 3rd. So you have a full 12 weeks to complete what will be 8 deliverables for this year's Academy. I think it's going to be hard for people to really say that they can't complete those deliverables just based on time. Obviously, people have other life priorities or unfortunate events that might come to the fore, but I think for most people, sneaking in these events here and there in order to get the credit for the Academy is going to be much easier than in years past. I think there's also a unique benefit for those people pursuing the pro contract. By starting the Academy earlier than they ever have at the beginning of August, I think it opens up some opportunity for those pro contenders to leverage kind of that peak power and strength that they see in the traditional season. Usually that race season, you're still optimized somewhere into August. You may not have necessarily built up too much fatigue to perform at your highest level, so they may be able to leverage that so that gives them a better foot forward in order to be evaluated to go into those semifinals. When you push later into the year, a lot of those pro contenders that might be racing on the real road, they may have packed in a lot of fatigue. They may be starting to taper off in terms of their peak power. Obviously, these folks are elite, but when it comes to comparing elites against elites, every last watt matters. And being able to pull this a little bit forward into the season, if they can make their way indoors to knock out some of these workouts, I think it'll be a better bet for them in terms of being evaluated for the semifinals. Another positive change that I think that they've made, which is a good start, but I'd like to see them do more, is including a prize for somebody who is not at that elite level, somebody who's not contending for the pro contract. This year, they have a random drawing for all the graduates to potentially win a Canyon Air Road bike. Pretty cool prize, especially considering that it's not going to be performance driven. I'd love to see them do a little bit more, maybe expand out some swag or even maybe some sub competitions at different categories. I know they just rolled out their new categorization for racing, but maybe there's an opportunity to engage the community a little bit more and push them to compete in their own realm rather than making this primarily for the pro contenders. Unfortunately, I think that this is where the positive changes end. I'm in no way trying to be overly negative or hyperbolic in what I'm going to talk about here, but as I'm going through some of the changes they've made specifically to the workouts, I feel like this is going to push away a lot of potential community engagement in this year's Academy and is really going to be focused on pro contenders first. And I will expound as to why I feel that way. And to preface this right out at the outset, I don't think Zwift is doing this to purposefully punish the community members. I think there are some extenuating circumstances here. This is all my opinion, but let's talk through some of the changes that they've made. First off, they have eliminated the group workouts, and these are on demand only. So that means that you have to go into your workout folder and select the Zwift Academy workout that you want to complete in order to access that workout and get that completion credit. Group workouts have been a huge draw for community in the past. There's a couple of benefits that are attached to that. And just to be clear, this is not a function of my bias. I actually don't like group workouts. I find them distracting. That is part and parcel of my experience and my ability to motivate myself through structured workouts. But I think I'm the minority based on the feedback that I've gotten from several of you in the comments, as well as what I'm observing out there in the community. People really love those group workouts. And as I said, it does a few things for them. One, there's the accountability function. First, you're signing up for a time frame, and you're creating somewhat of a forcing function for yourself that if I signed up on the companion app for a ride at 6 o'clock, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit sluggish and unmotivated at the end of a hard work day, but you know what? On my calendar, I'm going to throw my leg over the bike and I'm going to get that stuff done, and you almost never regret it when you're done. There's also the accountability that's created by working in that group. You don't want the other people to see your avatar. Not that anybody's really focused on your avatar, but the spotlight effect makes us think that they are. Nobody wants to be seen cutting an interval early or failing out. So it helps to motivate people to push a little bit harder, even if they feel like that interval is really hard. Maybe if they were alone, they would have pulled the plug, but they're going to push for those few extra pedal strokes because they don't want to be the one avatar of the group that's failing out early. Suffering and solidarity can be a great motivator for a lot of people out there. And obviously there's the social element, which is a major portion of Zwift. Getting into those group workouts or rides, maybe using that chat function during your warm-up, your cool-down, or your recovery intervals, it helps to maybe take your mind off the fact that you are about to suffer, especially if the workout is reasonably difficult. I think there's also a component involved with putting the Zwift Academy out of sight and out of mind. There's extra friction now for a lot of people to go in and to select that workout. You have to click on the workout screen, then you have to click on the Zwift Academy folder, then you have to select your workout, then you have to select a course, and then you can finally go ahead and get started. Over that period of time, albeit with the Zwift Academy tile kind of at the top of your main screen, it may be something that fades into the environment. That tile is going to sit there for a long period of time, and if you only have to do 8 deliverables over 12 weeks, it's easy, unless you're going to do them in a short time frame, to kind of forget that they're there. having them available on the Zwift Companion app or on the event screen is a good reminder, you know what, let me knock out that workout today because it's there. They're doing workout number 2. I need to get that one done. It's a great pull system to get folks engaged in the workout. Now, with that being said, if this were the only change that I wasn't a big fan of, I can kind of understand why they did this. A 12-week period for this campaign is a long time. And while I think that's a positive change, I do see that there may be some difficulty in understanding how to schedule those different events optimally. What do? Do you do workout number 1 for 2 weeks and then 2 for 2 weeks? Or do you kind of cycle through over and over again? How do you make sure that you're not saturating the schedule with Zwift Academy events for too long and allowing the Academy to go stale? There are a lot of different events and groups that are vying for spots on that calendar, and it does seem that every hour or every 2-hour events for 12 weeks might be unsustainable. I think that there's a balance to be had there, but that could be part of the reason why that they're not allowing for those group workouts this year. But we have to layer in some of the other changes to get a more robust understanding of why I think that this Academy is not only not a great value, but not designed for most of the people watching this video. The second change they made to the workouts is that they've completely eliminated the short version of the workout. I know last year, and I believe the year prior, I had kind of said that we need a third layer of workouts. We need short, medium, and long. I don't think that's a huge encumbrance to the platform to carry one more workout file per workout and maybe add a third tier for those different events. But instead of expanding it out to include a greater audience, they've actually shunted off a huge portion of their audience that are either time constrained or not necessarily up to the fitness or just new to cycling by eliminating those 30 to 45 minute workouts that will allow them to get credit for the completion of the Academy. In a vacuum, there is no good reason to do this. This, strictly speaking, eliminates people from contention to graduate from the Academy. And if you didn't give a second thought to this change, it would be really easy to believe that Zwift only cares about the pro contenders and they've just completely turned their back on the remainder of the community. That's even exacerbated further when we talk about the design of the workouts and making them even more difficult for those people who are maybe beginners or early in their cycling training journey to get involved and to be able to complete those longer 60 to 75 minute workouts. There will be a very high failure rate on these particular workouts for those people in those less experienced or less fit categories. However, I may be willing to give Zwift a pass on making this change because I think there might be a specific reason, and if my intuition is correct, this change may be temporary to 2024. Now, if you've gotten this far in the video and you're thinking, hey, this broad, she's not so bad, she's not completely stupid, you may want to support the channel by hitting all the buttony things, the YouTube-y stuff down below, thumbs up, subscribe, bell, whatever buttons you want to press. They're all free. Anyway, let's move on. For those of you who have participated in Zwift Academy in years past, you know that in order to be eligible for the Pro Contender competition, you had to release your data using a free premium subscription to Today's Plan. Today's Plan is just a data handler. It helps to analyze the data that you get from your head unit or from Zwift or from whatever you connect to that system. It pulls your data in, can give you a good power profile. It has some really strong metrics for athletes and coaches to review in order to see where they are in the different domains of their cycling ability. In March of 2024, they had to shutter their operations and their intellectual property was not purchased, at least to my knowledge, by any other company. Zwift had a great partnership with them that they would take the data and they would be able to parse some of that out and help to filter that cream to the top, so to speak, so that that smaller group of individuals can be evaluated for those semifinals, and that's probably done more manually. Some of the evaluation and judging seems like a bit of a black box, but I suspect that some of the filtering was done by the program, and then the very last steps were done by a human or series of human beings. Knowing that between that period in March and then July, where they're just announcing the Academy, the nuts and bolts were probably all put together for the Academy, and there wasn't enough time to seek another contract with a data handler, something like a Training Peaks, or even intervals.icu, any other system that can pull some of that data and analyze it in a way that I don't think Zwift is natively capable of. There's a certain amount of functionality in Zwift Power, but I don't think it's quite powerful enough to do what they were typically doing to help to analyze those values. If we take a quick look into their terms and conditions under the judging category, where this page had historically made some mention of Today's Plan and releasing your data to Today's Plan, through that free offering of the premium subscription, you can kind of see in here, right in the middle of this clause, it says participants will be judged on their performance and prescriptive content, including a number of structured workouts and races on the Zwift platform. Data obtained from other sources outside of Zwift Academy workouts may also be considered for performance analysis. they would need to call out in that clause if some outside entity was pulling that data. Obviously, for privacy reasons, they've only talked about Zwift here, and the clause about the pulling from other sources, I am 99% confident that that means other rides and other events within the Zwift platform. Basically, all of that data is available at their disposal. It helps to give them a sense check for any kind of power manipulation, any sorts of inconsistencies. So if other data is available on Zwift, they will be subject to reviewing that data to select those semifinalists for the Pro Contender competition. Any of you who have even tangentially worked with data analytics in the past, you'll know that it is not a particularly easy process. It's very intensive, especially when done manually, and it requires some very sophisticated systems from an AI perspective to help to tease out tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of data points individually for the multivariate analysis that the Zwift Academy is going to draw for that Pro Contender competition. So in the absence of a powerful data analytics solution, one of the things that people can employ is some sort of data validation, some sort of front-end error proofing, or some forcing function to filter down the data before it even reaches that raw state that needs to be analyzed. I think in this case, the two changes that I've talked about are such forcing functions. Number one, you're going to draw less people in general. By getting rid of those group workouts and by getting rid of the short workouts, you're going to reduce the population of data that you're going to have to analyze, because this particular academy is going to be less appealing and less accessible to the vast majority of riders on Zwift. Second, there are fewer permutations to deal with. You don't have to deal with a combination of short and long workouts. You only have to look at the long ones. There's no additional noise in the data. You know that you have a binary. You've either completed this workout or you didn't. You're not looking at events and individual on-demand workouts. You're only pulling in one particular type of data set. You know that that workout is completed, and then at least at a high level with the availability they have today with Zwift Power, they can probably do some front-end filtering with different kind of critical power elements like 20-minute power and 10-minute power, and be able to filter out that first pass there and then have a much smaller data set to work with. So I don't think it's an impossible task, but not having a plan for it and not having a solution to help them to work with this data on the front end, in my opinion, may have been a huge driving factor for some of the simplicity and changes they've made this year, even over last year, which was a very simple and pared back Zwift Academy. I can only hope that this is a stopgap for 2024, and as they move forward into 2025, they'll be able to layer those elements back in. They may be able to partner with another company and have a solution so that they can work with that data without kind of being unduly punitive to those members of the community that are losing a huge feature set from Zwift Academy. But who knows? This could be a complete walk back from the Zwift Academy being a flagship event for the greater community. Maybe they do move forward as being focused primarily on the pro contenders, but throwing a bone to the greater community. Even if you look at what they have in terms of the unlocks, they're very sparse this year. There's only two. You have the kit at the midpoint after you complete 4 events or workouts, and then you'll have the paint scheme for the Canyon Air Road. It's not really a top-tier bike. It's not a bad bike, especially if you're early on in the levels. These aren't really compelling unlocks, and that's one further element that kind of leads me to believe that they're trying to not sweeten the pot for people in the greater community. But let me know what you think. Why do you think that they made the changes to the workout structure to seemingly make this less accessible to the greater community of riders? But I know a lot of you who are like me don't necessarily use the group workout function, and you're capable of doing the longer workouts. So that's not necessarily going to turn you away from this year's Academy. So I do want to talk about, at a very high level, each of these workouts, and you can evaluate for yourselves if these workouts really are of value for you and if there's something that you want to fit into your training plan or into your schedule going forward. So we're going to dive right into Zwift's website here. I am logged into their main page. Here it is. It shows my progress report, shows the unlocks that are available. If you scroll down here, you'll see a snippet about each of the workouts that are available. And talking about these workouts, there are 6 structured workouts available. And in the past, for the pro contenders, there have usually been 1 or 2 bonus workouts that are not required for graduation, but they were more assessments, structured workouts that were really assessments to evaluate different critical power durations for those pro contenders. This year, there are 6 total workouts, no bonus workouts, and of those 6, 3 have been converted from traditional energy system building to assessment style workouts. Again, on its face, seems to push more and more in the direction of being pro contender forward and not community forward. But I'm going to be talking about these workouts, and I want you to understand if I'm making a value judgment in terms of the quality of the workout. You can talk about a good workout in the general vernacular where maybe you go out on a group ride, you worked really hard, you put it all on the table, you pushed yourself, you burned a lot of calories. That's a good workout. And I'm not fundamentally disagreeing with that. But when I'm making the value judgment for the purpose of this particular discussion, I'm talking about a good structured workout in that it is designed to help you to build a particular energy system, something that can be built into a training plan that you can progressively overload and tweak over time to facilitate a long-term response. So when I say one of these is potentially a good or bad workout, that's what I mean. Not that it's going to set you backwards in your training, but more about the value long-term that introducing these particular workouts may have for individual riders. So jumping back in here, starting with this very first workout, this is one of those assessments I was talking about. If you're familiar at all with the 8-minute power test, this paradigm will look pretty familiar to you. Some high-end primers on the front end, a fatiguing effort that's around your threshold to make sure that you are starting to engage that aerobic system and you won't be working anaerobically for this open set here. If you see these squiggly lines on top, this means that your trainer will go into free ride if you typically use erg mode, and you will be responsible for maintaining that power at the maximal level without getting any feedback from the trainer. So in this case, it looks like they're trying to do two different things. And without a proper scale for this workout, the workout files are not yet available. I have to make my best guess as to how long these efforts are, but it looks on the front end like they're trying to get some maximal power tests completed, maybe around 1 to 3 minutes here and probably 30 seconds to 90 seconds here. So maybe a VO2 max effort and an anaerobic effort that's not a maximal sprint. So that will tap the legs a little bit for that high end, start to engage those type 2 muscle fibers. Then you're going to do what looks like maybe between 5 and 7 minutes at or around your threshold, so 95 to 105% of your FTP. And then here looks like maybe 7 to 12 minutes at doing what's going to proxy for an FTP for you. So this will be a maximal effort. You would have to suspect for your elite level riders, this is going to be north of 110, upwards of 120% plus of their FTP, basically holding on as hard as they can. This is not specifically an 8-minute power test, so I'm not sure what multiplier they're going to use. I think it depends on how long this interval is, but they're not going to present the FTP to you at the end of this workout. So that means that the average rider who's doing this assessment, in order to get value from it, needs to understand the rubric that they're using that may or may not be included in the workout dialog box when you select it into your workout screen. And then they have to do that math on their own or compare it to other such tests. So for the traditional amateur cyclists, even those who are competitive, a lot of times this is offloaded to a coach or offloaded to a platform. There are not a lot of people who know how to do this type of math. So the value for the average rider may be limited in this case. I'm not saying it's bad data, and maybe you're looking at the end of your season, you want to get a good appraisal of your FTP, but there may be better ways to do that for most people. Picking up a traditional FTP test out of the workout catalog will probably give you a more straightforward answer. Moving on to workout number 2, you can see power push here. This is a sprint level workout. What you're seeing here is a very specific type of sprint interval. This is your traditional end of the race sprint where you have a full lead out and then you're going to go for your maximal sprint. So you have a couple primers in the beginning here, and it looks like each of these interval sets get a little bit longer. So if I had to guess by looking, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and 5 minutes, where you start probably 100 to 105% of your FTP. You're moving into your VO2 max, close to your aerobic zone, and then here you may not be able to see it on the screen, but you have a free ride section at the end of these intervals here that you're going to do your maximal sprint. And then at the end, you have what looks like just an extension for the sake of load that you're going to get some tempo work in here. I would probably maybe try to simulate what most people would see in a sprint by putting this on the front end to bake in some fatigue and then do these interval sets. However, there is something to be said doing this fresh. Maybe I'd even get rid of this altogether and add an additional interval or two for these sprints, but I don't think this is a necessarily bad workout. It just is what it is. And if you're not really racing focused, that might not be a particular type of power profile or interval that you need to practice. Working your high end is important regardless of whether or not you race, but there's better ways of doing that for those people who are not focused on that type of power execution. Moving on to workout number 3, we have fatigue factor. Again, this is another one of those assessment style workouts. If you look at the profile here, this is what I would call a garbage structured workout. If you were just going to plug this in to do a structured workout, there's really no major benefit here. This is strictly an assessment, and what it's looking for is your maximal aerobic power before and after fatigue. So what it's doing is it's asking for what looks like about 3 minutes here of your maximal aerobic power, so that's at your VO2 max. How high of a percentage of your FTP, anywhere from 105% to maybe even 130% of your FTP, can you hold for that period of time? Then there is some tempo into threshold work here to put a little bit more fatigue in the system. You're starting to build up maybe a little bit of lactate. You're working glycolytically at this level. And then at the end, you're doing another maximal aerobic test here, an open test to see how you can perform And in theory, this is intended to look at the decay into the system and how much your power has dropped off between this first test and the second test after some fatigue. However, the average person looking at this won't even be able to compare apples to apples, because if the scale is correct, it looks like we're doing about 3 minutes on the front end and 5 minutes on the back end. So you are going to see some natural decay that comes from just the amount of time that you are working at your maximal aerobic rate. Your max aerobic power for 3 minutes is going to be different than it is for 5 minutes. So teasing out what decay is coming from fatigue and what decay is coming from the fact that the duration of that particular interval is longer is going to be very tough for anybody who's not a coach or anybody who doesn't have the requisite software to look at this workout and tease that out. I think for 95% of people doing this that can't analyze this on their own, this is a throwaway workout. There is better value for most people's time than doing this if they're not contending for the pro contender slot. The next one here we have is FTP overload. This is kind of bread and butter, sweet spot style work. And when I say sweet spot, it's typically working kind of around the fringes of your FTP. You're not working a lot at threshold, but you're working just sub-threshold, and then you may be dipping a little bit above to get that stimulus. And the benefit of this type of workout is to start to push that threshold level up from the bottom without baking in so much fatigue that you can't come back later in the week and in weeks to come to add more load to the system and do your other types of workouts. I think there's a time and place for sweet spot. I've talked about this in videos in the past. There's times of the season where you want to bake this type of work into to build that steady state, that sustained type of effort. I think the workout is fine on its own, but it really does need to fit into a larger paradigm of this type of work. So you would have to expand this over weeks and months of this type of work to really glean a benefit. Going into workout number 5, we have breakaway blitz. Again, this is a very racing-centric type of workout. It's a very specific power execution that is specific to those people who are either racing or maybe those people who ride in those competitive group rides. But you can see the profile is kind of the reverse of what we saw above, where you're starting at a very high execution of power. You may not be able to see it, but on the front end of each of these intervals is going to be a free ride section for a maximal sprint. So in a breakaway, you need to sprint to break the elastic from the group. You're going to have to maintain a very high level of power, whether it's anaerobic or very high VO2 max. Then you're not going to settle into something easy. You're going to sit around your threshold as you continue to make some inroads and separate yourself from the group. You may be able to settle in again at your tempo as you pull turns. In this particular case, there's another free ride section at the end. I think this is going to simulate somewhat of a counterattack. And then you basically have 3 of these. It's sort of simulating a race environment where you've got some tempo in between, so that doesn't mean you just get to back completely off, but there are some full recovery sets here so that you can maximize your power. It's blending a race simulation and also a workout that provides enough freshness so that you can maximize your power. Again, a very specific power execution. This is going to give you a solid stimulus, but if you were strictly going to work your high end, there are better ways to do this with VO2 max or anaerobic intervals. This is just to really help to practice how it feels and the suffering that's going to be attached to doing some sort of breakaway effort. It's valuable if you're going to race and if you're going to execute power in this way, but maybe not the most valuable for the everyday rider who's just riding recreationally or isn't necessarily training to race and be competitive. And finally, here's your grand finale. This is your last of your assessments. Again, looking at this workout, there are some interval sets in here that can actually be very powerful if you repeated them over 60 to 90 minutes. So if you did 3 blocks of this over-under type of effort or 4 or 5 blocks of these ascending efforts, this could make a very solid threshold style workout. But doing 1 and 1, this is really just baking in some fatigue so that there's another open power test here. Again, looking at this particular scale, I'd have to guess that this is maybe 6 to 10 minutes here. And then there's also what looks like a long sprint, something like a minute, maybe even 90 seconds at the very end of a very high execution of power. You're going to get a good amount of load in this particular structured workout. But again, it's not a great workout to work that threshold system. It's more to evaluate or test that threshold power level. So in terms of being fit for purpose for pro contenders, this is a pretty good swath of structured workouts. But you can tell that this isn't going to provide a very strong benefit for the everyday user that wants to challenge themselves. If you have the capability of working through these 3 assessments and these 3 workouts, and you can glean some insights that will be helpful for you and your training, they are perfect for you. I do not think that the vast majority of riders out there have the ability to really tease out some of these assessments, and there are better means of getting that same information elsewhere, more straightforward workouts that you can use from other sources, even those within Zwift. And I think there are limited structured workouts that aren't assessments on here that aren't going to do much to introduce people to different types of training zones and be able to give them a whole lot of value. I don't think that these are uniquely great workouts that you can't get that same stimulus elsewhere. I don't want to sound like I'm being overly negative about this. I'm trying to be pragmatic. For those people who already have a number of priorities when it comes to work, family, other priorities, other responsibilities that they have in their lives, our time is valuable to us. And if we're going to get on the bike, we want to do it with some sort of purpose. We want to get fitter. We want to get faster. We want to get some insights on how we can improve as an athlete. I don't know that this year's Academy provides the same value as years past, but that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think about these workouts down in the comments below. Let's put a bow on this video by talking about the races. There are 2 races this year. They may or may not be interesting for those of you who might not be participating in the Academy as a whole, but just want to kind of jump in for some competition. The first one is a hill climb challenge. It is a 30-minute timed event, and it's on Ventop. We all know that Ventop takes far more than 30 minutes, even for the best riders, to get to the top of. But Ventop, if we take a look at the profile here, it's a pretty consistent and gradual grade. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it doesn't have as many undulations as some of the other climbs as we may see in Zwift. And what this is proxying for is time trial ability. And I think most people will be able to evoke a higher level of power execution with that slight grade. Most of this is more mental and feedback driven than in terms of physiological capabilities. We can talk a little bit about muscle recruitment when it comes to being on its climb, but often people are able to put out more power because they're getting feedback from the lower inertia on a climb. So there is a very quick feed forward when you're climbing when it comes to speed. Dropping 5 watts or 10 watts is going to make a drastic difference the more steep that the climb gets. Even on a gradual climb, you want to maintain that momentum. You want to maintain as high an inertia feedback as you possibly can, so it's easier to keep the power on. When you're time trialing on a flat road, you have much more high inertia. You're getting some of that momentum, whether you're on Zwift or on the real road. You get to a certain point of, I'll call it terminal velocity, to use that term very, very loosely. But you get to a point of speed, and you'll see this even in the pro ranks, where you need inordinate amounts of power to move the needle in terms of speed. So you can drop off 5, 10, even 20 watts, and the impact on your speed at that point might be negligible. So the impetus to push harder when it's not going to make you go that much faster, all of the things in terms of aerodynamics and rolling resistance being equal, I think it's harder for many people to push more power when it's not making a difference. It takes a lot of training to be a very adept time trialist, so they may be able to elicit a much better evaluation of people's steady state time trial ability by using 30 minutes on something that is providing that type of resistance. And the second race is Summit Sprint Showdown. It's performed on Dushy Estates course in Yorkshire. It is a 9-lap circuit. If we want to take a quick look here at the profile, you can see that it's kind of up and down, right? You're climbing and then you're descending. So it's about 3 kilometers per lap, so about 1.8 miles per lap. It's not a particularly long circuit, but I think in this particular case, rather than looking at power execution and power profile, they're probably going to be looking at results. And because the course is more or less a rectangle and you've got that climb and your descent, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people to strategically use their power, use the pack dynamics, and to potentially make their break from the group, be out of sight, out of mind. And it's not necessarily suited for one type of rider over the other. It's going to be the person who can read the pack dynamics, to read the race and strategize the best, which is also an important skill to have, albeit different, on the real road and in real racing. Again, this is just my supposition. Judging tends to be a bit of a black box, but if I had to guess, there are going to be so many variables in this particular type of race, it's almost guaranteed that the highest power execution in the race will not necessarily be the winner. Whether you're looking at watts per kilogram or raw wattage, those power profiles may be evaluated, but I think it's more about who can manage the pack dynamics and this race strategy the best. But that's Zwift Academy in a nutshell. I don't think it's a bad offering. Again, I just think it is mostly focused on those pro contenders. I think for the first time in many, many years, I am not going to be performing the Academy this year. I don't think I'm going to be going through the videos either. Unless the audience overwhelmingly tells me that they want videos on these workouts and assessments, I think I'm going to skip them because I don't know that I have anything new or of value to add to the community. I think that I've covered a lot of the basics that I can cover about these workouts in some of my more evergreen videos in the past. And I don't want to just make content to make content. I value your time. If I have time over the next several weeks and months to make videos, which I should with the travel schedule starting to slow down a little bit, I'd rather make those videos that are going to be of greater value. But you guys can tell me if there's one or several of these workouts that you want me to zoom into a little bit more. I'm happy to provide that video if the community wants it. But considering how I think unpopular this particular academy might be, or inaccessible that it might be. I don't know how much value that those videos are going to have. But let me know, are you doing the academy this year? Show Teddy some love with all the buttons down below, the thumbs up, the subscribe, the bell, all of the things. Do it for Teddy, because I'm just a jerk. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.